After every conversation around studying that I have with someone who's achieved a lot and has very prolific results and is doing well, I try and make some action points. And so hopefully you have your own action points having listened to that episode, but this is what I will be trying to do differently based on that conversation. Now, I think there is benefit to writing down your actual takeaways, not because I'm ever going to look at these things or like make notes out of them, but writing as a way of concretizing your thinking, as a way of like actually saying, all right, like that was a really good conversation, but this is actually what I'm going to do differently. These are my specific action points. And so here we go. So the first thing was the role of pre-made Ankies. Now, the most interesting thing I found was to have two separate like Anki folders. One with the pre-made cards, which basically is a screen for like, do you know this topic? You know, you do the card, and if you feel confident with it, great. If you feel less confident with it, then that's an indication to go study that topic later. So it's a screen for what you know and what you don't. And then the stuff that you don't know, you can then put into your other Anki folder, which maybe I'll combine that folder with cards I make and pre-made Anki cards I like that I've been weak in. So that two folder system, I think, is a really good one. I'm going to start using that because particularly when you have lots of content to learn, like some of the postgraduate exams in med, the surgical exams, BPT exams, there's so much content. I don't want to be looking through a textbook for what I know and what I don't. And I don't want to make the assumption that I know, oh, and I'm good at this thing. I'm not good at this. I want to prove it. And I think a good way to proving it is practice questions and pre-made Anki decks for that short answer format. The second thing was as a mistakes document, and Daniel went into big depth about his mistakes document. Learning from mistakes is important, and so one weakness in my own strategy that I've identified is when I make a mistake on a question and I just copy and paste that question onto an Anki, I can remember that. Like I remember that the answer is B. Like if I see the picture or what part of the question, I'll just recognize, oh yeah, the answer to this is D. The answer, when I see the answer options, I'll say, oh yeah, it's this one. The learning point is not necessarily being drilled in actively. So I will, instead of just copying and pasting the question verbatim, try and rephrase it in a way that gets the teaching point across and still make it into an Anki card. I think for me, the mistakes doc is still on the passive side, but I think if I can take the mistake, rephrase it, and make it into a flashcard, that will be better than simply just copying and pasting the question because sometimes it's just too easy because you can just remember the answer from the last time you did it. Um, Another part of my studying that I think is a bit more boring and a bit more tedious is just going through like the spaced repetition cycle. And let's say I have a bunch of conditions on my Notion, right? And I used to go through those, let's say four times before the exam, but it's a bit tedious. So given that is a part that I enjoy a little bit less, I rush it a bit because I enjoy it less. I'm going to dial that down and probably increase the pre-made Ankis instead. So the idea is after you learn some topics, you don't necessarily need to just review everything equally, which is what I'm currently doing. You should use the practice questions and then the pre-made Ankis to screen for the topics that you have forgotten more or are weaker in. So rather than me just saying, okay, over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to go through all of the psych conditions and just review them again, just cause I'm filling out the next rep of the spaced repetition cycle. It might be me, I get a question completely wrong um, on fractures. And then I'm just like, okay, now is the time I'm going to review fractures. I'm going to write down everything I know or think about everything I know and then get a rep in of that spaced repetition there. So less formalized, less calendar of I'm going to do, this quarter of the course, at this 2 weeks, etc. And I think more just based on using the pre-made Ankis and the practice questions as an indication to tell me I need to just revise that topic again. That way, the topics I make more mistakes in, I get more review reps in. And then the topics that I'm good in, I don't need to review as much. It does have the risk I need to be able to cover all the topics with practice questions and Anki's. Otherwise, things just get neglected. So that's something as well. But a take-home message for everyone there is if there's parts of your study that you think are a bit less enjoyable, you're rushing them, the effectiveness is not what it could be, those are things to think about tinkering with. And that's what I'm trying to gradually do. Then there were some really interesting takes just about like the philosophy of studying, like what it is to learn. But I think for me, I was probably fell into the trap of just like thinking, all right, this is too complicated to be on the exam, so I'm not going to bother with it. And I think that's okay, but if you're interested in it, my new takeaway is just to learn it anyway. If I'm genuinely interested or curious, I'm just going to learn as much detail as possible. Even if that is too much detail for the exams, it all formulates as part of that story. It'll help you remember it. And when you're actually interested about something, it's fun to learn it as well. So if you're genuinely interested in a particular specialty, by all means, go in as much depth as you want. Don't just think, oh, like realistically, only these important conditions are going to come up on the exam, so I won't need to worry about the rest. I'm now going to go much more in depth, maybe into other topics like physics as well, if I'm interested in them. And then finally, like you have to have this all in mind. I think the end goal is important um, because like, realistically, I'm facing the prospect of, let's say I want to sit the GSSE exam over the next couple of years. I'm going to learn all this information. Most of it I will forget in the future, and most of it is not helpful for patients. It's just like for the sake of me ticking off an exam. And it's pretty hard to like find the motivation to like learn that, and it kind of feels a bit pointless. But I think knowing why this is all ultimately important. Yes, whilst most of the things I'll forget, the things that I'll remember are going to be really important. And to get to that stage of if you want to be a surgeon, you need to know your anatomy like the back of your hand. You need to be very, very good with your respective field. And sometimes knowing the principles of everything, knowing a bit about everything, that knowledge is vital to do well later on. And ultimately, as Daniel said, all of this knowledge has, well, much of it has practical implications for the way patients are treated and, the outcomes in surgery, for example. So having that end goal in mind, knowing that this is, a necessary step, looking at, examples of people you admire, of mentors, and saying that they have this knowledge, that I think is what I'm trying to use to counterbalance the motivation. So I'd be interested to know if other people had different action points to what I had, but these are some of the important things that I'll be taking away, which will hopefully make my studying continually more effective, more enjoyable, and help me just getting more volume in as well. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out many of my other videos on study. And if you haven't watched the podcast yet, please check it out because that's one of the best videos I've got on my channel.